Okay, today we are going to be continuing our journey to learn every Draw Steel class. Now we're doing the Conduit, the voice of the gods, your cleric, your priest. These are the most powerful support characters in Draw Steel, so if you want to keep your party alive, the Conduit might be for you. But what happens when you make one at level 1? Today, we're going to be creating Madame Lythanda. She was given visions of her own death as a child, bestowed upon her by dark, eldritch forces from beyond her universe. Madame Lythanda now steals the power of those eldritch forces for herself in a desperate bid to cling to a life that she knows is doomed. She will kill anyone to make sure that her cursed existence continues. She's a bit of a villain, but she'll work as our hero for this exercise. Madame Lythanda starts the game with 2 intuition. This is going to be her main stat. As for a Conduit, intuition is very important. The rest of your stats are going to be determined by some preset arrays given to you in the book. Once you pick those, you next need to figure out your stamina. As a Conduit, your stamina starts at 18, which means that, yeah, Madame Lythanda is right to fear death. That's not that much stamina in the grand scheme of things. She's going to want to stay in the back line and hide behind her tanks. On top of that, she also only has 8 recoveries. These allow her to regain stamina during battle, but given that she only has 8, she can only take so much damage in a fight, so staying in that back line is even more important. Once you figure out your stamina, next up are your skills. As a Conduit, you can pick between interpersonal and lore skills to improve your chances during tests. But now that the boring stat stuff is out of the way, now we get to our subclass. The Conduit is unique and is the most customizable class in Draw Steel, at least in my opinion. As a Conduit, you don't pick one subclass, you pick 2 domains out of a very long list. Combine them and then create your own subclass. For Madame Lythanda, I think it makes sense that she would pick the Death domain and the Fate domain, given her oracular visions of her own demise. Now, once you pick your domains, you get to pick one ability from the pair. I get to pick either the Death domain ability or the Fate domain ability. So for Madame Lythanda, I think the Fate domain makes sense. Oracular visions, which allows Madame Lythanda to gain fate points whenever she achieves a victory in like a combat or a montage test. With fate points, she can give a little buff to her allies' dice rolls, edging fate just so slightly in her favor. But that's a more passive bonus. If you want to use more powerful abilities, you need to understand your heroic resource. And for Conduits, their heroic resource is piety. Piety is gained passively, like every other class in the game. However, you also gain piety based on your subclass. For example, Madame Lythanda's Death domain allows her to gain some bonus piety when a creature within 10 squares of her meets their end and hits 0 stamina. Okay, pretty good, but that's not your main source of piety. It's actually going to be your prayer. Prayer is the primary mechanic of the Conduit class. Using your maneuver, you can call out to the gods and beseech them for aid. However, there's a little bit of a risk to this. Whenever you pray, you gain some piety, but if you roll low, your god will still give you piety, but they'll also give you some psychic damage along with it. You can annoy your deity if you pray too much, so pray at your peril. But you may want to ignore that psychic damage, as prayer doesn't just give you piety. Based on the domains that you picked for your subclass, you gain some extra, very powerful effects for your prayer. These can literally reshape the battlefield in your favor. And on top of that, you get both abilities from both of your domains. So for Madame Lythanda, she gets the prayer ability from the Death domain and the Fate domain. However, you can't use them at the same time. Whenever you pray, you pick one of them. But still, very powerful abilities await behind this prayer. For example, if I pick the Fate domain ability when I pray, I can give an enemy an automatic tier 1 roll or an ally an automatic tier 3 roll. That is really damn good, especially during boss fights if you want to prevent the boss from dealing extreme damage with their next attack. Okay, now that we understand our heroic resource and our main mechanic, it's time to move on to our triggered action. For Conduits, the triggered action is not as important as for other classes, but it is still something you want to keep in mind. You get to pick between 2 triggered actions. For Madame Lythanda, I think we're going to pick the quick build option, Word of Guidance, which allows her to give a little buff to her allies' dice rolls whenever they roll a damage-dealing ability. It's simple, but hey, during tense fights, this can be the difference between winning and losing. Okay, triggered action out of the way. Next up, we have to pick our enhancements. Like all spellcasters, conduits don't have access to gear like kits. Instead, they pick an enhancement which gives them some powerful passive bonuses. However, as a conduit, you actually get to pick 2 enhancements. Your prayer, which are typically more offensive enhancements, and your ward, which are more defensive enhancements. Yet more proof that the conduit is probably the most customizable class in the game. While you can pick and choose, swapping out your enhancements as you will, I think Madame Lythanda is going to have some primary picks. For her, we're picking Prayer of Power to give her some bonus damage on all of her damage-dealing magic abilities, and the Spirit Ward, which allows her to deal some damage whenever a creature attacks her, summoning spirits to protect her body against hostile forces. These are some good picks, but again, if you want to swap out your wards and prayers, you can do that as you continue your adventure. Okay, those are fun, but Spirit Ward is definitely not going to be killing any bosses throughout our adventure. If you want to deal damage, you want to pick your combat abilities, starting with your signature. Signature abilities are your bread and butter in Draw Steel. They're like cantrips in D20 Fantasy. They don't cost any heroic resources, meaning you can spam them, though overusing them is probably a bad idea, as they're definitely weaker than your heroic abilities. But still, good to have in the back pocket. For Madame Lythanda, we're going to be picking Drain as our signature ability. Drain allows us to damage an enemy and, through that damage, heal an ally, ripping their life force out to support our friends. It's a really strong support ability, and honestly, I can see myself using this a lot if my party are going down in an intense fight. But, again, you can't just rely on your signature ability. Moving on to your heroic abilities. As the name implies, heroic abilities cost heroic resources. You're going to want to build up piety before you use these, but it is absolutely worth it. The first ability you're going to pick is your 3 piety ability, an ability that costs 3 piety. You get to pick one out of a list, and for Madame Lythanda, we are picking Call the Thunder Down, which allows her to deal area of effect damage, as well as pushing allies and enemies to better positions. I love support powers like this. She's not healing anyone, but Madame Lythanda can move allies into more advantageous spots, like cover, and move enemies off of cliffs. Wonderful. But this is nothing compared to the 5 piety ability. Like the 3 piety ability, you get to pick one of a group, and for Madame Lythanda, I think it's time we pick something a bit more support focused since we have so many damage dealing powers. We're picking Sermon of Grace. This is a really good ability. It allows Madame Lythanda to heal her friends in an area of effect, as well as allowing them to ditch a negative status condition of their choice. This can absolutely shift a boss fight in your favor. I've watched the Conduit in my Draw Steel game absolutely save the party from a TPK and turn the fight into a winnable one with just this one power. With that, you've picked every ability that you need at level 1. But what happens as you level up? Like every other episode of the series, we're not going to be going in-depth every level, but I'll give you the spark notes. As Madame Lythanda levels up, she gains some stat bumps. Every level, she gains 6 extra stamina, and at certain milestone levels, like level 4, both her primary stat, intuition, as well as her gained piety increase by 1. But besides that boring stat stuff, she also gains some respite activities as she levels up. These are really strong. They're downtime projects that you can use to gain some lore or help your friends. At 3rd level, she gains Minor Miracle, which allows Madame Lythanda to bring a creature back from the dead as long as she has at least half of their body in front of her. This is like really strong. Like better than Revivify in Dungeons & Dragons kind of strong. And a lot of people complain about Revivify, so I have a feeling I'm going to see some game masters changing up how this particular mechanic works. Now, besides those abilities that are given to all conduits, your domains, your subclass, will also give you some powerful passive bonuses and respite activities. For Madame Lythanda, as a death domain conduit, she can use Seance during her downtime. Seance allows her to call upon the spirits of the dead to answer her questions. And these can be like any spirit. She doesn't need to have the body in front of her. Though keep in mind, these spirits are not bound to tell the truth and act as they did in life. So if Madame Lythanda tries to call upon like one of her past victims, they might not be willing to talk to her. You know what I mean? Now, those are all great, but I know the best part of leveling up is finding new ways to crush your foes. And Drawsteel gives that in spades. When Madame Lythanda reaches level 5, she gains the ability Vessel of Retribution, which allows her to use her maneuver to turn an ally into a living bomb. When that ally takes damage, the bomb explodes, causing every enemy in a large radius to take 15 damage. Yeah, not bad if you need to wipe out your foes. It doesn't even damage your friends. Win-win. Now, turning an ally into a living bomb with just your maneuver, okay, that's pretty impressive. But at 9th level, you can choose one of the coolest abilities in this game. You can use 11 Piety to summon an entire freaking dragon to the combat. Yeah, you heard me right. This thing has 100 stamina and can use an area of effect breath attack as well as a melee attack, both of which deal respectable damage for a companion character. This thing will stay around on the battlefield, helping you against whatever you need. It is very, very strong, and in my opinion, is the pinnacle of the Conduit's power. Like, yeah, you can pick other powerful abilities at 9th level, but I mean, who doesn't want to summon a whole freaking dragon, man? Come on. Once you get to max level, you become the avatar of your god on the mortal plane. And when you do so, you can open up a portal during a respite activity to visit that god in their home and ask them 3 questions pertinent to your quest. You also gain the ability to spread your prayer effects across the battlefield, using 3 different players as basically like your pylons. Now, besides that, you also have a new epic resource. In this case, you gain Divine Power. Like all epic resources, Divine Power is gained during a respite and essentially acts as a pick-me-up whenever you finish a respite. Instead of now needing to build up your victories and build up your piety, with Divine Power, you can immediately wake up and use powerful heroic abilities, such as summoning the frickin' dragon. Oh my god. Oof. With that, I think we finished Madame Lythanda. With her ability to summon dragons and mold fate to her will, I think she has a pretty good chance of surviving the doomed death that has been bestowed upon her. In any case, you now know everything you need to know about the Conduit. If you want to call down Divine Power to smite your enemies as well as support your allies, then the Conduit might be for you. But with that being said, if you guys enjoy and want to see more of our content, then check out our guide on the Censor, the holy Paladin equivalent in Drawsteel. It's linked up in the cards, but before you go, please do leave a like on this one and subscribe to Crispy's Academy so you don't miss any of our content as it comes out. And finally, if you want to support us directly, then you can head over to our Patreon where you can gain access to exclusive Dungeons & Dragons and Drawsteel content. It's linked down below. Always remember that your support is what makes these videos possible. In essence, like, comment, subscribe, support. That's all for now. Now get out there and draw steel. I hate you.